Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we are going to be going over Unit 3 lesson number 2. As always, you should have downloaded your interactive notebook pages for today. So this presentation goes along with those pages and we're going to jump right into it. So just to recap, yesterday we had a lesson on the 3 different types of rocks. So we learned that there were igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic rocks. And they're grouped based on how they form. So igneous rocks come from the crystallization of magma. And remember, when magma crystallizes, it just means it's cooling down. And as a reminder, we do have those extrusive rocks where the lava cools on top of the surface and they're smooth. And then we have the intrusive igneous rocks that cool underneath Earth's surface and take a little bit longer time. So it's a slower cooling down process. So those rocks actually have crystals in them, and an example of that would be like granite. Sedimentary rocks form from cemented sediment. So remember, there's those 5 steps to creating sedimentary rocks. They form very distinct layers. So the sediments are layered on top of each other, compacted, and eventually cemented together. And as a reminder, fossils are only found in sedimentary rocks. And then finally, we have metamorphic rocks. And metamorphic rocks are just rocks that have been changed by temperature and pressure. So they get buried deep within the earth and they are exposed to very high temperatures. Remember, our core and our mantle are very hot. So they're exposed to high temperatures and they're exposed to high pressure, and that causes them to kind of heat up, and then they're moldable and they get shifted into something else. They go through a metamorphosis, kind of like a caterpillar turns into a butterfly. So now that we know about the 3 types of rocks, we have to learn about something called the rock cycle. So we have to be aware that any of the rocks, so any of those 3 rock types, can be changed into another kind of rock. So heat and pressure may change an igneous rock into a metamorphic rock, or a metamorphic rock can be melted into an igneous rock. Also, a metamorphic rock could be weathered and eroded and eventually be picked up as sediments and then cemented and compacted into a sedimentary rock. So the continuous changing and remaking of rocks is called the rock cycle. So the rocks of Earth's crust are constantly being recycled from one type to another. So at any given time, magma is crystallizing, forming sedimentary or forming igneous rocks. Sediments are being cemented, forming sedimentary rocks, and then deeply buried rocks are metamorphosing into metamorphic rock. So basically what this means is that these rocks are not necessarily staying this type of rock for their entire life. The Earth constantly changes. We know that plate tectonics moves the crust on the planet, and these rocks are constantly getting cycled and being formed into new rocks. So the process that they undergo will determine what type of new rock they are changed into, and we just have to figure out how to follow the arrows of the rock cycle to determine what kind of rock is being formed. So there is some energy that drives the rock cycle. So number 1 is temperature, and this is going to be heat from the Earth's interior that will cause melting and cooling. Mechanical energy, things like erosion, deposition, and cementation. And then gravitational energy, so that's pressure from layers of rock above. So these are the 3 types of energy that really drive our rock cycle. Now, what do you need to know? You need to be able to look at the rock cycle, and you need to be able to follow it and determine what kind of rocks will be made. Now, your independent practice today, you will be using this rock cycle to help you fill in your own rock cycle diagram. And we just need to be aware of where the arrows are going, what processes are happening, and then what new rocks are formed. So if we take a look, let's start with our sedimentary rock here. Okay, so remember, our sedimentary rocks are made of sediments. As they get layered on top of each other, they get cemented and packed down. So we've got a sedimentary rock just kind of chilling. So let's say over time, this sedimentary rock, it gets buried underneath the earth. Okay, so as it gets buried and gets deeper and deeper pushed down, it's exposed to this heat and pressure. Right, so the sedimentary rock gets pushed down, it's exposed to the heat and the pressure, and well, it gets turned into metamorphic rock, wouldn't you know? So We started out with a sedimentary rock, but it got pushed underneath the earth, got exposed to that heat and pressure, and it metamorphosized into metamorphic rock. Okay, so now there are a couple things that can happen to this metamorphic rock. Number one, if it gets pushed down further and gets exposed to extremely high heat, it will melt. Okay, and if it melts and becomes molten rock, we will then get magma. Okay, so these rocks can be melted down back into magma. Also, though, if this metamorphic rock kind of stays closer to the surface, it can undergo weathering and erosion. So instead of melting, it can just be broken down, and if it is, we will get sediments. Okay, so the fate of this metamorphic rock depends on the activity that it's exposed to. So if it's exposed to melting and high heat, it will turn to magma. If it's exposed to weathering and erosion, it'll break down into sediments. Okay, so then once we have magma, so we're starting in the mantle with magma, and this magma will cool eventually, and when we cool magma, we know that's when we get igneous rock. Okay, so we have igneous rock here that's formed from the cooling of the magma. Well, now this igneous rock, there's a few things that could happen to it. If it gets kind of buried deeper in the earth and exposed to heat and pressure, it could turn into a metamorphic rock, right? Because remember, a metamorphic rock is just a rock that's been changed from a different type of rock. So if this igneous rock is exposed to this heat and pressure, it will become metamorphic. Also, this igneous rock could get buried deeper within the earth, be exposed to high temperatures, and wind up melting again. So it could become magma. So it could kind of get caught in this process where the magma cools, becomes rock, heats up and melts again, and goes back to magma. Also, igneous rock can also be subjected to weathering and erosion. So if this rock gets broken down, the little crumbles that fall off of it will turn into sediments. Okay, so this igneous rock could go one of three ways. Well, if we come back up to our sediments here, over time, these sediments that are eroded from our igneous and our metamorphic rock will eventually be eroded away, deposited, compacted, and then cemented. Remember when those minerals get into the little pores and cement it down and become sedimentary rock again. Now, sedimentary rock is also very brittle, so it can be broken down pretty easily. So it can be exposed to weathering and erosion and then be turned back into sediments. So basically, these rocks can go through different processes to become sediments, magma, or different types of rocks. What you need to know and what you need to understand is be able to follow the arrow and then understand what happens to the rock if it's exposed to that certain thing. So if sedimentary rock or igneous rock are exposed to heat and pressure, they'll become metamorphic. Okay? If any of these rocks are weathered, they'll turn into sediments. Okay? If sediments get compacted and cemented, they'll turn into sedimentary rock. If our igneous or our metamorphic rock get buried too deep and get too hot, they will melt back into magma. Okay? We just have to be able to follow the processes and know what happens with each one. And so for today, your independent practice will be just to use this image here to help you fill in your own rock cycle and really just be able to comprehend following the arrows and understanding how each rock turns into either its components or a new type of rock. So again, the takeaway from today is that these rocks are constantly being recycled. They're turning into different types of rock as they experience these processes in the Earth's lithosphere. So that's all for today. If you have any questions, make sure you let me know. And if not, I will see you in the next one.